Sheri, thank you for being here.
I am delighted to chat with you.
So, Sheri, you wrote a book, your memoir, The Beautiful No. What is a beautiful no?
Yes, the title chapter of my memoir, it basically is the story about how I did get the job at the Oprah show at 35 years old after a crazy string of other jobs. And it's become a very much a foundational spiritual principle that, you know, and just a little teaser, I had been up for a big interview in advertising and thought I had the job, basically celebrated getting the job, and then didn't get it. And it was at a time when I had gone out on my own to freelance. And I was terrible at that. So I had no money. I was broke. I was starting to feel that oncoming sense of, oh my gosh, this is such a failure. I'm a failure. When am I ever going to figure this out? And shortly after that, I got a message on my answering machine. And that's when they still used to be on tape. So you could play the message. And it was someone from HARPO Studios who said, we were cleaning out an old closet. We found your reel, your little VHS tape of commercials and your resume. Will you come in and freelance? And I know it's crazy. It's so crazy. But what was so crazy is it took me a couple years to look back and think, oh my God, if I had gotten that big other job that broke my heart when I didn't get it, I never would have left the security of that situation to go freelance at the Oprah show. And that's when I realized what a beautiful no that was.
Yeah.
And I started to think, what if all those no's are beautiful no's? What if I actually believe what I say I believe, that the universe does have our back and we are being guided and we are in kind of like this co-creative experience. And it has profoundly changed my life to reframe those old stories.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about, you said you had a reel. What were you doing before? You said you were doing different things.
Yeah, I was in it. Well, by that time, I mean, this was one of my good jobs. I had been a typist in a typing pool, an assistant toy store manager, a toy store manager, a 7-Eleven manager, a 7-Eleven store supervisor. I mean, I'd done everything. I've been here, there, and everywhere. And I'd finally gotten a break and had been trained in production and producing, and I was producing television commercials.
Okay.
And so I had at least found the freeway I was supposed to be on, if not the path.
Right.
I at least was in the vicinity, even though it wasn't the content that, you know, I really felt like I was meant to create. So, yeah.
So being an executive producer, so you worked your way up to that. You said you started as a freelance producer.
I produced the commercials for the show. So I produced the promos.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how long did you do that?
8 years.
Oh, okay. So you did that for a while.
I did that for a long time. And then for 2 years, in a historic thing that never happened, hardly, I got moved to the show. I was the book club producer. Then I was a supervising producer. And then, shock of all shocks, I was made executive producer.
And so for our listeners who maybe don't know what that means, what does it mean to be the executive producer?
You're running it. You're running the show. You are the leader of the teams. You are, working with, in my case, working with Oprah. What does she want this season? What's the theme of the season? What's our intention for the shows? And then we had, probably 500 people at HARPO that directly did the show and supported the show. So you sit in the control room and you run the show.
Yeah.
With the director and the help of the technical crew.
So it's basically like a large scale operation that you almost in some ways were training for. You when you were talking about what your resume was before, you kept saying manager of this, manager of that. Right. And I was thinking to myself, you know, you were managing. It's yes, this is at a much bigger scale when you were at the Oprah Winfrey show, but it's the skill set is there, right? To if you know how to manage something and make it happen.
I mean, and that had been going on for a long time. You know, I liked being in charge, even as a kid, in charge of the rehearsals and our skits, and you know, here's what we're going to do Saturday, and I'm in charge, and you know, everybody show up then. So I had a little bit of that producer thing, manager, leader thing going on from, you know, from an early age. And, you know, that there is no question about it. All those experience, like layered upon layered upon layered, and it all came in handy.
So going back to The Beautiful No, which is, you know, your memoir and story about your life and how your philosophy, as you just described, about looking at things and learning to embrace that they are meant to be that way because you don't know how things will unfold. That requires a certain level of self-awareness. And we hear from a lot of women that self-awareness is something they struggle with. Do you have any advice you can share, or is there a daily practice, some tips that you can kind of give people about how they can be more self-aware? Because it's critical if you're going to embrace a no and really learn how to make that work in your life, you have to be self-aware.
I mean, listen, I would say to anybody, don't beat yourself up about the process of becoming more self-aware. It's the human condition. We lose our way. We go, oh my gosh, we come back. But I would say the daily practice, the moment by moment practice, it's really a spiritual practice, which is, what is the story you're telling yourself in your head about yourself, about your life, about what's going on, the events that you're experiencing as you move through a day? That level of mindfulness really is the bubbling cauldron foundation of self-awareness.
Yeah.
That why am I being very curious about your reactions? You know, gosh, I could feel my anger rise up. Well, I wonder what that's about. Or, I just had that clench, like fearful clench. I wonder where that's coming from. And just being really curious about how we move through the world and paying attention to what we're saying about ourselves. One of my favorite teachers and my good friend Deepak Chopra said, I just read this not too long ago, it still blows my mind. Every cell in your body is listening to the dialogue going on in your mind.
Yeah.
And that's a wake-up call for all of us, that we're casting our fate with these stories. Yeah. We're determining our future. We're speaking our lives into being, from health to any number one of the areas that we care about.
Yeah. You know, Sheri, I'm really appreciative that you're bringing this point up, because, you know, we have this community of women. A lot of them are social media influencers, and if you are someone who puts yourself out there on social media, especially, as I'm sure, you know, you have a very popular Instagram show, you know that you get negative feedback, even when you're doing, and I don't mean you personally, but in general, like a lot of the women that we're working with and who are part of our community really take a lot of hits, because when you put yourself out there, you know, people can be critical. And as women, we tend to be very hard on ourselves. So your point about putting that the voice that's in your head is how your entire being feels. How do you have any thoughts or advice you can share on how to shift that? If you are somebody who is self-critical and the voice in your head maybe on a negative is more of a negative tone, how can women shift that?
Well, it starts with being aware of it, noticing that. And I will say that I've met the rare person whose internal voice, before they start paying attention to it, isn't super critical. You know, you talk about if you're an influencer, you put yourself out, you're going to get some negative feedback or some criticism. It pales in comparison to the number we're doing on ourselves when we're not paying attention to what that story is. And when we're just like, you know, there's 100 things that might be said. And let's say 2 of those things are less positive and 98 are glowing. We're only going to pay attention to the 2 because we're almost wired that way.
Right.
So it's a rewiring of self, saying, whoa, and it starts with you. You know, for me, how I cue myself is that there is a voice I use when I'm talking to puppies and babies in a grocery store. And that's the tone and the voice that I remind myself to use with myself.
Yeah.
That I must be dear to myself, that I must be my own beloved, that the opinion that needs to matter most to me needs to be mine, and it needs to be glowing and loving and compassionate.
Well, and giving yourself some grace, because
always,
that and it is a gift to learn how to do that. Do you have daily practices that help you to live a productive and happy, you know, useful life?
Yeah, I mean, here's my theory, and if it lands, please borrow it. And I feel like we all need to really, really discover what that is for ourselves individually, what our individual system or plan needs to be. I call them my esteemable practices, as in esteem, just practices that I know when I incorporate those into my life and I execute them, I really do them, that my esteem for myself rises, because I know I'm valuing myself, I'm caring for myself. So those are, and that, yes, and I edit them. It isn't one and done. There's a more divine masculine approach that's goal setting and accomplishing and check the list. What I'm trying to do for myself is be in flow. And that is editing it. Like, okay, not so much with this anymore. Let's add something like this, where my practices are a movable feast. You know, they change. So I would say meditation is always an anchor. I'm a TM meditator, transcendental meditation.
Can you talk about what that is? So for people who are not familiar with?
Yeah. I mean, it's transcendental meditation is you actually get trained by somebody who's a certified TM teacher. You get a mantra, which is a sound, a Sanskrit sound that you repeat to yourself. And you use that sound as a tool to drop in, to just drop in. And it isn't a religion, and it isn't a spiritual practice unless you'd like it to be. It's a tool. It's a tool, and they've done tons of studies where the amount of stress it reduces, the clarity it brings. There's lots and lots of health benefits. So that's one. You can do a guided meditation. There's a bunch of apps that you can calm, Headspace. So meditation is the purpose of meditation really is to open some space that allows you to, you know, literally download download your highest knowings, you know, it opens some space and kind of takes you out of that chattery mind. So, you know, oftentimes out of meditation, and I'll have my best ideas.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, that thought just came to me. It's that divine inspiration. So meditation for sure. You know, walking's a great one. Like I have them from the bigs to the littles. I do rituals and ceremonies. Do a burning ritual for what things I need to let go of. I do. I picked words. There were 10 words I chose for this year. So I like to take the top 2 and kind of turn them around and really think about them and kind of infuse my day with the energy of those words, what the energy I wanted to bring into my life. And you know, then there's other ones more like eating plants, you know, stuff like that. Yeah. But I really try to look at it every 3 months or so and say, what's working? Yeah. What feels like it's done? What do you want to add? What, you know, what are those esteemable practices going to be going forward? So when we're just letting life happen to us, we're like a leaf on the wind. When storms are brewing, our lives are stormy. When things are sunshiny, our lives are more sunshiny. We're kind of living at the effect of everything that's happening externally. And these days, that means we're creating a not so pleasant experience. And you know, what you and I are talking about right now is it's literally taking all those great skills that people have developed in their careers and at work and saying, okay, there's some gold in them hills. So when you put your hands on the wheel of your own life and you really start, you know, I like to call it calling down the thunder, which is, you know, whatever your beliefs are about a higher power, the force, you know, if you're a Star Wars person, whatever you believe about it, that you are in creation of your life with very powerful forces. And we would be wise to manage this life experience the way we've managed so many other things, and remind yourself how much a say you have, how much power you have in the outcome, in creating that experience.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I think this too also goes back to the idea that as you're talking, I'm thinking it's also about forward momentum. And even if, and I think a lot of women, we feel like, okay, well, we might take 2 steps forward, but then we take a step back. So yes, I've tripped up, and yes, I took a step back, but I still have that forward momentum. And I think a lot of the way your philosophy of the beautiful no too, I always ask guests, how do you deal with failure? And I feel like your whole way of living the beautiful no, your memoir, is about how do you deal with setbacks?
Yeah. Or perceived failure or rejection or disappointments. Things didn't go your way. Listen, this life experience is all in the framing. And the more that we can frame ourselves to know, and we keep noticing that, oh, without this, then not know this. Without this, then know this, you know. And what you're saying right now, I think again, that set a goal, 30 days. If I'm not perfect, then I failed at it. I think the more helpful framing is it's a net game. It's a game of 10 steps forward, 7 steps back, net 3 steps forward.
Yes.
That's the game we're playing.
Yes.
You know, the game of being human, which is it's that all or nothing thinking, I have found generally leaves me with nothing. And if I can just be like, if I can collapse the time, and that's kind of the beautiful no philosophy is, if I understand that a disappointment, heartbreak, rejection is actually the universe scooting me. No, not this. This is really, this is what you want. Then I can collapse the time that I mourn that disappointment, because you're just losing days.
Yeah.
Have your one human day, have your good cry, have your, I'm disappointed and I feel bad, and move on. I think the same thing is true of when you're trying to incorporate new habits, new practices, which is, so you eat 10 chocolate bunnies. Then, let it be that within 48 hours, you're back on track.
Yeah.
And not next January 1st.
Right. Don't lose a year. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So, Sheri, I know I mentioned to you right before we started recording that your podcast was the Sheri Nancy Show was one of the first podcasts that I ever listened to. It was so enjoyable to have when I traveled a lot. It was like a wonderful companion and really helped open my mind to many different new ideas. And really, I loved listening to your conversations with your friend Nancy, who's your friend for many years. Can you talk a little bit about the role that women have played in your life and the importance of forming a tribe of women for you in your world?
Yeah. Well, this was an idea that actually this came from a woman named Lori Harder. And she wrote a book about, gathering your tribe, finding your tribe. And we were doing an interview with her for the podcast one day. And it occurred to me, it inspired this idea in me that, like, here's what you're really talking about. You're talking about intentional friendship. Mm-hmm. And for, generationally, this is different generationally. So I look at women in their 20s now, and they're free of some constructs. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really not saying this about them, but for the rest of us, we just drag those relationships along, until we're in our graves, whether they're still working or not, whether they're uplifting or not, whether you've both grown or not. And there is something about requiring that your friendships be that real, true support system. Mm-hmm. I'm not willing to sit around and speak my tales of woe for the millionth time anymore. Mm-hmm. I now understand that is incredibly destructive to the kind of life I want to lead. Yes. So when you decide you're going to be different about that, there's some people who are going to be happy about it and some people who aren't.
Right.
So the role of intentional friendship really is becoming that person that you want to hang around.
Yeah.
The person who comforts, but doesn't go down the downward spiral with you. Yeah. A place where you can be witnessed and you can witness, and then you can remind each other what you really want, which is alignment and possibility, mm-hmm. and elevation and transcendence.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of relationships right now I'm really drawn to.
And I'm curious, now you have your Instagram show. I'm curious if you've ever thought of stepping in front of the camera and being in front of the camera. More so than you were on the one season of Behind the Scenes.
Well, you can even imagine how excited we producers were about having cameras follow us around.
Probably not so much.
No, and certainly nobody on the team was. So I had to, that wasn't super fun. But I will tell you, that was never an ambition of mine. Mm-hmm. But I did find when, so as my memoir was being published, and then I know I'm going to have to go out and talk about myself and sit in the chair. I had lots of resistance to it. Like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Well, then once I was out there having to do it and having to, you know, do book events and things like that, and, you know, talk about things that, you know, shamed me or that I felt embarrassed about, or my failures, or the amazing thing is, I'd leave those things going, gosh, I feel kind of healed. It was, you know, to step forward. Not only are people sharing their stories like, oh my gosh, once you said that, I feel so much better, because if you were struggling with it, then I feel okay that I struggled with it. And I'm like, I know. And you know what? The fact that we can say that out loud, and I can say that, you know, bringing light to shame, it's a very healing experience. So I guess here's where I come out at it now, you know, as I'm developing my own stuff. I still think it's probably going to be, you know, very cherry picked. You know, I'm not looking to launch a big on-camera career by any means.
So, and you'd mentioned that you had a few words that, or 10 words that you were looking at for 2021. Can you share what any of those are?
Yes, I'll tell you my top two, because I'd have to pull the list. I don't remember exactly what's on. My first one was sovereignty. And I know that sounds super fancy, but I don't mean it to be. But it's the perfect word for stepping into your own light. So, you know, what we were just talking about, it's like, I think that that's a good word. And I'm glad you asked me so I can share it with people listening. That's a good word to grab a hold of. Yeah. What that means to step into your own light. Because even some of us who've run huge businesses, or who have had, success in our working lives, still we might not have stepped into our own light. So sovereignty is a really good one. The second one we also talked about earlier is agency. And by that, I mean really understanding that you have agency over this experience. That is, take the bull by the horns, put your hands on the wheel. This life is yours to design. And so I really wanted to remind myself, and I had other great words. Like, I think one of my words was curiosity. Like really being curious about what my responses to things were, just so I can keep excavating. If there's an early wound that's still driving me, I want to clean that out and be free. Yeah. I want to just keep lightening my baggage.
You strike me as somebody who really does have a finger on the pulse of what might happen for societally from what we've gone through for the last year or so, right? Since 2020, since March of 2020. And I'm curious to hear, how do you think it's going to impact us moving forward? How do you think the year that has passed will impact us moving forward?
Yeah, there a boatload of knowing coming out of that year. Well, I'll say from a home life perspective, here's what I hope I take from it. The fact that I was still fooling myself about my level of mindfulness and my level of presence. And when I had because I could feel my discomfort when there was nowhere to go and no artificial busyness to distract me. So that was really good for me. Like, just sit there. Just sit there. You don't have to be doing anything every single minute. That you're talking about your to being rather than to doing. But is that right? Is that true? So I had a real good look at that. I mean, I think here's what we should buckle up for. If you're a person who is resistant to change, let's work on that, because change is all that's coming.
Yeah.
This human experience is going to be constant change.
Yeah.
People coming and going for real. The way we work and engage, it will never be the same. Our vision of what a superstar at work is drastically changing from what it was when I was like working and working my way up the ladder. And that was a superstar would literally open their veins, let blood from their veins, cancel all their plans, 24/7 availability, you know, that dedication and devotion that was all consuming. Those were the superstars. And rightfully so, that is going to be completely turned on its head, and it's in process, both generationally and just in what has become very obvious.
Right.
That a superstar is somebody who self-manages at the highest level.
Yeah.
Who take radical self-care.
Yeah.
Radical commitment to their own happiness. And then those are the people who bring that energy into our work world, you know, into our community, into our those are the stars.
Yeah. I think that is so astute, just to really understand that is shifting so much, you know, in so many ways. Employees now are also becoming their own brands, and it's good for the company, right? That if we develop that. So it's become so much more complicated in some ways to be a superstar. So, or to, you know, to be that great addition to a team. You worked at the Oprah Winfrey Show for a long time. I'm sure you learned a lot from working so closely with Oprah, but there's something that was in particular important that you learned from her.
Well, listen, what I would say is the greatest benefit, employee benefit, was being paid to build a spiritual life. That was just like in the air, in the ethers, you know, words like intention and alignment, and that, you know, being exposed to new thinking and new languages and new ideas around spirituality and reverence and divinity. And that felt like, you know, I went in as a lapsed Catholic with a little Marianne Williamson. Ooh, this is interesting. And I came out understanding the mystical nature of this human experience in a quantum way. And that, you know, it really is about energy. And story and energy and vibration. And that is, you know, it's very powerful to be exposed to that and to know that. So that I'd say is the greatest gift of all.
What is next for you?
Listen, here is my thing. Less is more. So I find it very interesting that at this stage of my life, that I'm an entrepreneur, and that means I have more agency, even more agency than I normally would have. But I want to make sure that my yeses are super special. So even with, you know, I'm just used to being like, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And all right. And okay. And it's so great that I have this opportunity to tighten that up. That I am just getting super clear. I teach a 12-week course that I'll do 3 times a year. That's it.
Okay. What is the course?
It's called The Course. I'm in the midst of it right now. I'm with my first cohort on week 7, and it is the most fun I've ever had, for sure. And then, so I'll do that 3 times a year, and I'll do, I'm just putting the finishing touches on a membership idea that I'm going to do that I think will be a ton of fun. And then that's kind of it.
Yeah.
You know, just kind of maximum impact with minimum hours. And that kind of feels like my heart's desire.
Yeah. Well, Sheri, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I love your perspective, and I am so grateful for the advice that you shared with our listeners and with me. If people want to follow you, is Instagram the best place? Where's the best?
Yeah. Instagram, if you're an Instagram person, sure thing, at Sheri Salata. And, you know, I'm always updating my website with what's going on, sherisalata.com. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Sheri. Appreciate the time today.
Thank you.